Hello and welcome to People working together for your safety. I'm your host, Stan Salot. The title of our show today is Consumer Safety, Industry on Our Side. In our first segment today, my guest, Tony Nocito. I'll get that right, Tony. I may have to do it 2 or 3 times. Tony Nocito and my other guest, David Losi, and I will discuss the findings from lab tests performed on behalf of advocacy groups, which continue to demonstrate an excessive amount of toxins in the products we buy. Consumer Report magazine says that according to their probing, one green charm, now pay attention to this, one green charm the size of a pea sold at a well-known retailer, and you know me now, I don't disclose names of retailers, was tested and found to contain levels exceeding 100,000 parts per million of lead. Given those levels, a child who accidentally swallowed a charm could be at risk of lead poisoning. Why do we continue to get concerning toxic results in consumer products despite the growing number of industry regulations and health industry outreach? In our second segment, David Losi, partner at Goldberg Segalla, will help us understand the new conflict metals. Some of you may know this as conflict minerals. They're essentially the same thing. The new regulations and reporting industry that reporting industry is required to provide. This is tied into some regulations that were put in place back in August of 2012 by the Security Exchange Commission, which adopted a rule mandated by the Dodd-David Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act to require companies to publicly disclose their use of conflict minerals that originated in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the DRC, or an adjoining country. I am pleased to have both David and Tony with us today. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Stan. Appreciate it.
I want to get us started today, and we're in 3 segments today. The first segment, we're going to be talking about the hazardous substances found in everyday products, consumer products, and I want to take a minute now and introduce Tony Nocito. Tony is a person who's dedicated the past 30 years to become a pioneer in the specialized field of non-thermal EPA-approved destruction of asbestos, process known as ABCOV method. And Tony, I'm actually going to let you give us a little more explanation on your background rather than me trying to get all those big words out there.
Okay, Stan. Thank you for having me back on the show to discuss the hazardous substance-free products and to discuss toxins and metals and their effects on the environment and human health. As you know, I started in the asbestos. I was in the construction business all my life, and I developed a process that destroys all forms of asbestos and any asbestos-containing material. And because of the myriad amount of asbestos-containing materials, it took quite a number of years to see them, look at them, and treat them. Although some of the process is engineering, about 80% to 85% of the process is actual physical hands-on, looking at the material, treating the material, and finding the best chemical formulations for it. I think what you're doing today, in my opinion, I assume all our opinion, is corporations have a social, sustainable, environmental responsibility to their employees and customers, as well as society. They should not be allowed to get away without divulging the health risks used in their products, and they should strive for safety of their employees as well as the public that use their products. I'm going to use asbestos as an example. This is not the 1920s or the 90s operations conceal the health risks of hazardous substances, such as the lethal dangers of asbestos, as did the manufacturers who use asbestos in their products that have killed millions of people and will continue to kill millions of people long into the future. The manufacture of asbestos products were very politically connected, which allowed them to manufacture all asbestos-containing materials into the public for building materials and many other uses. But the government was one of the biggest purchasers of asbestos-containing materials, as were the power industry. They also kept the dangers of asbestos secretive of their employees and everyone who used their products. As people were happy to have jobs in the area of the Depression, they were not as environmentally aware of the dangers of asbestos as we are, and were not as educated as our society today. Our society has become very environmentally conscientious about substances that affect the environment and, most importantly, our health. Today, sustainability and corporate social responsibility are starting to become a must. A worker right to know about hazardous substances they are being exposed to is a law. Also, OSHA has strict regulations to special requirements for hazardous materials and any other dangers to human in the workplace, as well as the right to inspect the potential human health hazards and other hazardous conditions that may appear in the work.
Tony, if I could, your work has been, some of your work was the asbestos part, but you've also been working recently on, as I understand, some work on hexylvalent chromate or chromium.
Hexavalent chromium. Yeah, we have a process that will turn hexavalent chromium into trivalent chromium, which is not dangerous.
So, as you did with the asbestos, being able to convert that from a lethal or a toxic material that had no home really to something that could be managed without the additional issues that come from it when it's in its toxic condition.
Well, the problems that we have with hexavalent chromium is that they come from manufacturing years ago, where they would take the tailings of the hexavalent chromium from chrome plating, and they would dump them in the backyard, or they would dump them in a specific area. Port of Baltimore is one of those areas. New Jersey is another area where they have hexavalent chromium dumps. And what happens around these hexavalent chromium dumps is that they become cancer clusters. Hexavalent chromium has a lot of effects on the human being. It causes asthma, liver disease, skin cancer, right into cardiovascular disease, and many other lethal effects on human organs were discovered with exposure to hexavalent chromium. And right now in Baltimore, they're fighting to stop a building from being built through a hexavalent chromium landfill site, which is covered with asphalt right now, and they don't want them to open it up. Hexavalent chromium is a very dangerous, lethal, heavy metal that can cause a lot of illnesses to different people, like I said.
As I understand from my experience, it's also used as a common coating on sheet metal and other products as a way of retarding the corrosion of those metals.
Right.
So,
well, I assume you remember, maybe, I don't know if you do or not.
Yes, I'm old enough to remember her.
Chrome bumpers.
Chrome bumpers. I thought you were going to say Aaron Brockovich, but no. I do remember chrome bumpers as well, yes.
Okay, and if you have a Harley like I had, you definitely had chrome on that. So chrome plating business is still in effect, but it's much more regulated. And
yes,
that leads me into a friend of mine was in the lead smelting business, and I had a long conversation with him yesterday on lead and how the regulations changed. And the lead smelting business is almost the same as the asbestos abatement business. They have to go through a clean room, a shower, and a dirty room, and they go into a negative air containment with the respirators to work with lead, so they wouldn't breathe in the lead contamination. When they went to lunch, they'd have to go to the dirty room, into the shower, take a shower, go to the clean room, go to lunch, and the same thing when the shift was over. One of the good things about the lead business that you can't do in the asbestos abatement business is they would test for blood. He says that if the blood level was too high, they'd have to wait. They'd take them out of the containment, and usually it was because of the workers' negligence that the blood levels were high. They would take them out of the containment, and they would make them do other jobs around the factory. He ultimately, which will bring me into cadmium, he ultimately went into sold his business, and he bought into a battery recycling business, which of course has lead in it, and the same rules apply even though it's in Mexico. But they do not take batteries with cadmium in them, because cadmium gets into your system, it doesn't get out, whereas to the lead, it gets in your blood, but it'll eventually dissipate itself. And not in children. In children, it causes, as you know, educational dysfunction and brain damage, especially young kids.
Another aspect of lead and cadmium both is their common, one of the common uses of that is for coloring. It's an inexpensive way of getting colors created, going from one color to another. It actually helps, as I understand, reduce the cost of the coloring materials. and is often used even in as benign of things as printing on cardboard boxes.
Right. It's cadmium is. You didn't want to mention, I guess, names of where, like, the Shrek cups had cadmium on them. They had this particular company that had we call 12 million Shrek cups, and another one had jewelry that was by a who's become more famous singer that sold it. Her jewelry had high levels of cadmium on it. They had to recall all that. Cadmium does cause respiratory problems, damage to the liver or kidney.
Yeah, it is. It's something we've covered a number of different ways on the show here, that there's a lot of products that are still made today, consumer products. And I'm always sharing with folks, and I continue to do this, that particularly when you get into children's things where you have the low-cost costumes for Halloween, costumes for children doing dance. And I say children, I mean, it goes all the way up to adults, but the one that troubles me the most is when I see parents buying the plastic belts, the metal belt buckles that have the hexchrome on them, the plastics that have lead or cadmium that exceeds tolerances that are safe for our children. And I guess one other point, and I've shared this before on the radio, is that when I was 7 years old, my father was a plumber, and back in the day that I was being taught how to do plumbing, which he thought would be a good way for me to decide to do something else with my life by teaching me young how to work hard. I learned how to sweat joints, lead pipe joints. I learned how to put cast iron pipe together using lead. I was picking up lead ingots and carrying them around and paying absolutely no attention, because back in those days, lead wasn't really identified as one of the contributors to autism, Asperger's, and some of the other things that we've identified.
Well, it's banned today. They can't use it. And sweating pipes, I just had some plumbing done in my office.
And they can't do that in New York anymore?
No, they have to have less than 0.2% of lead in the lead sweating material.
Yeah.
They did sweat pipes with lead.
We used to
have clamp systems now.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead, Jay.
We used to do it with asbestos gloves and boiling lead.
Right.
Tony, I really appreciate the conversation, but we need to take a break here. Welcome back to People Working Together for Your Safety. I'm your host, Stan Salot. The title of our show today is Consumer Safety, Industry on Our Side. In our first segment today, my guest, Tony Nocito, and I have been discussing the findings from lab tests performed on behalf of advocacy groups, which continue to demonstrate excessive amounts of toxins in products we buy. As I said in my opening comments, advocacy groups continue to test. We continue to see testing done, and for the best purposes. I mean, this is not done just to make life miserable for manufacturers. It's really done for our safety. And that testing, both here in the United States and testing records that we've seen from Europe, continue to show us that the amounts of lead and cadmium and hexylvania chromate, the flame retardants referred to as PBD and PBDEs, as well as mercury, continue to come into a level that's come to us as in consumer products at a level that is really higher than what the human body and our pets, for that matter, should be exposed to. Tony is, as we said earlier, has done tremendous amount of work, particularly in the asbestos world, and is now doing work in the hexchrome area to change those products at the end of their life, or when they're no longer being used, into a, I'm not sure, what do you call it?
Trivalent chromium.
Well, it's still a metal. It's still a product. So
right.
Is just referred to as a, well, you said it. It's trivalent instead of hexvalent.
Right, which is not dangerous.
Got it. Okay, so we all learned something.
Hexavalent chromium is very poisonous, especially to the human body.
Yes.
It causes all kinds of diseases.
Welcome back to People Working Together for Your Safety. I'm your host, Stan Salot. The title of our show today is Consumer Safety, Industry on Our Side. My guests, Tony Nocito and David Losi, and I have been discussing the work they are doing to address the management of hazardous substance disposal and how industry is dealing with the new reporting requirements related to conflict metals. While we could go on talking about this subject for hours, our time is unfortunately limited and coming to an end. I'd like to ask David and Tony, one at a time actually, to give us their closing thoughts. You know, as David was just talking, we have new regulations. We have things coming up, and we're in uncharted waters here as well with the work that Tony is doing. So without further comment from me, I'd like to turn the mic back over to David. And David, I'm intrigued. As I mentioned to you when we were on break, I'm going to stop doing anything with conflict minerals or materials and send my clients your way.
Well, I think we have to continue our lives. We have to push on. We're going to learn how to deal with this unfortunate situation. When the filings occur in May of this year, I think we're going to learn a lot. We're going to learn from each other and from our co-filers, and it's important to have a look at that. It's also important to understand what is going on in Africa and how careful your due diligence has to be. And if there's there are two pieces of advice. One is, for heaven's sakes, if you've got the file, get your consultants lined up now. Lawyers that know this area, engineers or other consultants that can help you track these things, accountants that can do this tracking with you, and create a conflict minerals decision tree, a flow chart, if you will. I've done this for a couple of clients. They're different. There isn't a one-size-fits-all. But take what you do and take the Dodd-Frank Section 1502 and create your own decision tree, and that way you have something to refer to, and every question that comes up, you can go back to your decision tree and be reasonably certain that you're on target. If you don't do that, the way 1502 is written, I think you come back on yourself and drive yourself absolutely nuts. So my advice is surround yourself with competent advisors and prepare a decision tree as quickly as you can.
Very good. Thank you very much, David. Tony?
In hazardous materials and hazardous substances in our products, I think there's two directions our society must implement. The first being circular economy, what comes out of the manufacturing of a product and its end life should be able to be put back into the same manufacturer of the same or similar products. And the second being cradle-to-cradle product standards. On this subject, I have to quote Mr. William McAdonogh, an architect of sustainable development. With cradle-to-cradle approach, the products we make are divided into three categories: products of consumption, products of service, and unmarketable products. Products of consumption such as cleaning chemicals, shampoos, packaging materials should be made of biological nutrients so they create no health risks, pollution, or waste throughout the life cycle. Products of service such as cars, washing machines, and televisions will continue technical nutrients that are wholly and cleanly reclaimed and recycled endlessly. And the unmarketable products include things like hazardous waste that cannot be consumed and used in an environmentally sound way. These should be discontinued and substituted. The companies that follow these guidelines will become financially stronger, supporting a good environment, show social responsibility, and most importantly, provide a green, safe environment for our children and our grandchildren to grow up in. And that's my closing statement.
Thank you very much, Tony. And I again thank both you and David for sharing your time with our audience today and the valuable information. We don't mean to scare folks on this radio show. We mean to bring people together, share our knowledge, and create a safer environment for us all. We work primarily in the hazardous substance, toxic substance area, and as well in the counterfeit environments, or if you will, counterfeit mitigation detection areas, trying to reduce, if not eliminate those. As you've undoubtedly heard over the airways in recent weeks now, there are a number of things that go on that are questionable relative to the various products we use every day. And when failures occur, it's sometimes concerning whether or not the product actually failed because of a design flaw or whether it was a counterfeit product or something similar. I'd also like to recognize and once again thank David for his contributions on the show and the law firm of Goldberg Zagala. And David, you're still out there with me, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. I do again appreciate you taking the time today. Hopefully it kept you inside and a little bit warmer up there in Connecticut.
I'm pleased to have the opportunity. It was a pleasure to be with you, Stan.
Well, we appreciate all that you folks do with us and helping our audience understand what's happening in the world today. And Tony as well. This is the second time we've been privileged to have you on the show, and we thank you.
Can I thank David for giving us that information? I think it's a big job that he has to move forward on what he needs to do.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks, Tony. Yeah.
I wish you a lot of luck. I think it's going to be a mess in the beginning until you can really sort it out, which I think is really difficult to do. From my experience in Africa.
We can solve the whole problem, and I'll close this part of the show by saying we can solve the whole problem by getting rid of all the electronics and everything it takes to make them.